Florida State just wrapped up their final Junior Day weekend, and this is now the third straight weekend with Junior Day visits, and Florida State has made quite the splash and hosted several top prospects for the 2025 recruiting cycle. They also hosted some elite prospects for 2026 as well, but that's so far away, so we're going to mainly focus on the top 2025 guys from this weekend. Starting with four-star running back Alvin Henderson. Obviously, it's still fairly early in the cycle, so these boards are going to shift around a bit, but I would say Henderson and Usman Kramal are Florida State's top two targets at running back for 2025. Henderson is an Alabama kid coming from Elba High School, and Alabama kids are always a tough pull away from the in-state schools like Auburn and Alabama, of course. He does currently even hold a crystal ball in favor of Auburn, and I probably would still consider them the favorite at this moment, but Florida State is definitely not giving up, and I would say that Florida State is firmly in his top 2 to 3. I also know current FSU quarterback commit Tramel Jones is actively recruiting him pretty hard on social media, so let's hope those efforts pay off. Now let's get into the trenches, starting with some offensive linemen. Dontrell Glover, a four-star offensive tackle. He was a former Alabama commit, but they seem to have fallen off some in this recruitment. At this point, he has a lot of interest in Georgia and Auburn, but it definitely sounds like Florida State made a surge here in this recruitment this weekend. The Noles also got a visit from four-star offensive lineman Carday Smith, who's been to campus quite a bit. He camped at Florida State and even came to Tallahassee for a game last year, so it is early in the process for him, but Florida State has already established some familiarity and some good relationships there. Sounds like this is going to be another Florida State versus Auburn versus probably Florida kind of recruiting battle, so you love to see the Noles getting the visits and making some ground here. And we all know Alex Atkins does a great job recruiting the offensive line, and Noles fans would love to see another great haul here in 25. Florida State currently holds a commitment from five-star Solomon Thomas as well, so adding another blue-chip guy like Glover and or Smith would be huge. Next would be four-star defensive end Javion Hilson, who recently flipped his commitment from Alabama to Florida State. He's a top 50 recruit and quite frankly, a kid that Florida State has to hold on to here for 2025. It sounds like John Papuchis has done a great job here in this recruitment, and Hilson definitely loves the development aspect at Florida State after seeing several elite edge players come out of Tallahassee like Jermaine Johnson and Jared Verse in recent years. He's a highly touted prospect, and he's definitely going to take some other visits throughout the spring and summer, but everything looks good for Florida State right now. Now, believe it or not, Florida State had 3 blue-chip linebackers on campus this weekend as well. Gavin Nix, Jaden Hardman, and transfer linebacker Cam Riley from Auburn. For Gavin Nix, I think Florida State really made some push here. He loves Norvell and really likes the stability throughout the coaching staff. He talked highly about how Mike Norvell turned down the Alabama job and stuck with Florida State. And obviously that was huge. And I think that's a common theme we'll see during this cycle. And people may underestimate how big of a deal that was in multiple ways, but especially in recruiting. For Nix, I think that Florida is probably the biggest competition right now. But with the season that we expect the Gators to have in 2024, who knows if Billy Napier's going to even finish out the season. So I think consistency in the coaching staff could be what sets Florida State apart here and hopefully ends up landing his commitment. Now, transfer linebacker Cam Riley was also in Tallahassee this weekend. He said his visit to Florida State was everything. He really enjoyed his time here. It sounds like NC State is the other school involved for him mainly, but honestly, Florida State should be able to out-recruit NC State for anyone. I do think he's a Nole, and I think we may finally be seeing a turnaround in linebacker recruiting. It's been much needed, and it's awesome to see. Now, last but not least, and maybe the biggest fish of the entire weekend, five-star wide receiver Caleb Cunningham stopped by on Sunday. Granted, it was just a short visit after visiting Florida on his way back to Mississippi, but you definitely got to keep finding ways to get these kinds of players on campus. He's from Mississippi and holds a prediction to Mississippi State right now, but I have my doubts that that's where he ends up. He's, of course, being recruited by all the big guys like Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, and, of course, Florida State. I think the interest between him and Florida State is real, and it's very mutual. He said that he knows that he'll be developed if he were to come to Florida State, and he's definitely paid attention to the Noles. You know, he talked about how they had a great year in 2023, and even affirmed what we all know by saying that Florida State should have been in the national championship game. So he definitely fought along with some real interest in FSU. He plans to be back for Florida State's Legacy Weekend on March 23rd, and that's going to be a big one. That's where Florida State made a lot of their moves in the last cycle. So another big one brewing for them this spring. Cunningham probably won't be making a decision anytime soon, but will probably be coming out with a top 6 this summer, and I'd look for Florida State beyond that. FSU is really putting in work early on in this cycle, and I just think back to years past, even last year, right? The linebacker boards and defensive line boards, they weren't this broad. We definitely weren't getting this kind of interest so consistently. It's still very early on, and Florida State will obviously have to start finding a way to close out these recruiting classes, but I think this could be Mike Norvell's best recruiting class yet, especially if they go out and have a strong showing in 2024. But either way, it's a great way to start out the cycle with these junior day visits, building some real hype going into the spring and the summer. Florida State currently sits in a good spot for a lot of elite playmakers, and I'd look for that to be a continuing theme over these next few months. Thank you guys for coming, hanging out, and watching the video. If you enjoy the content and enjoy keeping up with Florida State recruiting and Florida State football in general, really, definitely like the video and hit that subscribe button. It helps me out a ton and helps you guys stay in touch and up to date with all the big FSU news and future videos. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and I definitely think we can hit that by kickoff in Ireland. So definitely consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk soon. Go Noles.